Squid Game was incredible. What a great show. Not just because of the two big identity reveals, but because of the third implied twist. There are three main clues that everyone is talking about, but that's lazy. So I went back and rewatched the season to find as many clues as possible. Here are 10 scenes and events that take on new meaning on back of the father-son theory. First, let's review the three commonly discussed clues. Gi-hun said that he could not digest regular milk, and the old man said that Gi-hun was just like his son, an early clue that the old man may be Song Gi-hun's father. The second clue was the marble town. Both Gi-hun and the old man said that the alleyway reminded them of the alleyway from their childhood neighborhoods, and last but not least, Gi-hun's birthday. The first pin number that Gi-hun tried was his birthday, 0426 or April 26th. And during the scene in which the old man pretended to have dementia, he asked Gi-hun what day it was, because if it was the 24th, then it was his son's birthday soon. And that aligns with Gi-hun's birthday. So those are the three clues that every lazy article points out, but let's go deeper. Here are 7 other clues and scenes that take on new meaning if the old man is Gi-hun's father. Number 4. Curious introductions. The old man was the first person with whom Gi-hun spoke on day 1, and it just so happens that the old man was contestant number 1 and Gi-hun was the last contestant, 456. Gi-hun pointed that out, and the old man said, "I knew that." Gi-hun then told the old man that he should be at home, having his daughter-in-law cook for him, to which the old man asked Gi-hun if both of Gi-hun's parents got their food cooked for them by their daughter-in-law. Number 5. Red light, green light. The first game that the contestants played was red light, green light. The old man was the first to move after the first round of deaths, and he was having a blast. Both Gi-hun and the old man survived game number 1, but afterwards, the contestants held a vote to see if they would end the larger game, and the decision came down to contestant number 1, the old man. And although he wanted to keep playing, he chose no, possibly because his son had chosen no also. Pretty cute. Number 6. Chance encounters. Outside the game, the old man found Gi-hun sad and drinking alone and shared a meal with him. The old man commented on the small odds that they'd run into each other and said that they were, quote, destined to meet there. But in hindsight, the old man may have gone there to see his son one last time before going back to play the game again. And in the end, Gi-hun chose to go back and play the game again as well. Number 7. The team. Gi-hun and Chung Sung-woo formed a team with Abdul Ali, and the old man asked if he could join them. Then they were given a meal, and both the old man and Gi-hun remembered that type of lunch. Apparently, Gi-hun's mother used to make those meals for them each morning. And speaking of meals, Gi-hun came up with the licking technique for the honeycomb, and afterwards, the old man thanked him for that, as the technique helped the old man to pass the round as well. Number 8. The fight. The gangster, Yang Duk-soo, killed a man in the residential area, and money was added to the pot. So they all learned that killing there was allowed. Gi-hun told the old man to stay awake at night, and he did. The old man climbed to a top bed, screamed for them to stop the madness, and the front man did just so. The fight was stopped. After the fight, the group finally exchanged their real names, but the old man struggled to say his, seemingly due to memory issues, but possibly as a way of keeping his identity a secret from Gi-hun. And lastly, without even being asked to do so, the old man stayed up all night watching over their group. Number 9. Second watch. The old man gave Gi-hun's team advice as to how to win at tug of war, and afterwards, their new team of 10 created a barricade. They agreed to take turns keeping the watch, and the old man asked to join Gi-hun for second watch. During second watch, Gi-hun had flashbacks to a violent worker strike that he was once part of, and the old man said that he had heard about it. Then, the old man began suffering from his brain tumor, so Gi-hun laid him down and poured water on him to lower his temperature. Overnight, the old man wet himself, so Gi-hun gave the old man his own jacket to cover up the evidence, and later, the old man gave Gi-hun his own jacket out of fear that the game operators would get mad at Gi-hun for not being dressed to code. Pretty cool. The icing on the cake was that Gi-hun had the option of pairing with this guy, but he ended up choosing the old man, father's son. Unfortunately, the next game was the marbles, so they would be competing versus each other. Number 10. Gganbu. Gganbu is a term for a good friend, someone with whom you would share everything, even your marbles. The old man was dominating Gi-hun at the guessing game, and technically, Gi-hun lost. But the old man threw Gi-hun a lifeline by pretending to have memory issues, and Gi-hun took advantage of that. So they kept playing, and Gi-hun won, or rather, stole the old man's marbles. The old man was down to just one marble, and suggested one last bet. Winner takes all. And of course, Gi-hun said that wasn't fair. 1 marble versus 19 marbles? That's when the old man called him out as having taken advantage of a friend. Gi-hun felt bad. But ultimately, it's a dog-eat-dog world, so the old man did not hold it against Gi-hun. In fact, the old man gave Gi-hun his last marble, after which he told Gi-hun that his name was Oh-il-nam, and then faked his death. Number 11. The Last Bet. Gi-hun went on to win the game, but when he returned home, his mother was dead. That broke Gi-hun. So for the next year, he continued to live the life of a pauper. As he sat by the water drinking, he bought flowers from an old woman who gave him another Squid Game card with an invite to the Sky Building on December 24th at 11:30 p.m. He went there and learned that the old man was still alive, and the old man told him his name once again, Oh-il-nam. Il-nam told Gi-hun that money did not make him happy, so he and his buddies created the Squid Game, but even that was not enough, which is why he decided to play. And then he said that thanks to Gi-hun, he got to remember all the things he had forgotten long ago, which clearly may have had a hidden meaning. Il-nam may not have been referring to the fun he had had playing games with his friends, but rather the fun he had watching his son play games, as he had told Gi-hun about during the marble game. And of course, Oh-il-nam died at the stroke of midnight, or at least he pretended to die. Granted, he faked his death once, so the timing is either very suspect or very poetic, considering the fact that he died the moment Christmas began. And now, the ending. Hwang Young-ho shot his brother, the frontman, in the shoulder, and the frontman returned the favor. And it may have been an actual favor, because Young-ho fell into the ocean, but he may have survived, and only time will tell whether or not Young-ho chooses to play in Season 2. And here's a wild card. Oh-il-nam told the frontman that he knew that he would not have as much fun watching as playing. So it begs the question, will the frontman, who had already won the game in 2015, decide to play again in Season 2? Last but not least, Oh-il-nam's final bet was to see if there's still any good left in humanity. And Gi-hun won that bet. Someone did save the drunk guy. But even more importantly, after a year of mourning, Gi-hun was reborn. He went and got a fancy new haircut, and then finally went and found Kang Sae-byuk's little brother in a shelter as he had promised her that he would do. Gi-hun then gave Chol to Sang-woo's mother, who had unknowingly lost her own son when Sang-woo killed himself to let Gi-hun win the game. Gi-hun then bought a ticket to go see his daughter in the USA. But on his way to the airport, Gi-hun saw the salesman recruiting someone to the game. Gi-hun ran over and told that man not to go and took his card. Then, right as Gi-hun was about to board the plane to go see his daughter in the USA, he called the front man and threatened him. But only time will tell whether or not Gi-hun fights against the game or decides to take up his father's mantle, symbolized by the time that Oh-il-nam gave him his Player 1 jacket. Like father, like son.